The day she let me shatter alone. There are moments in life that carve themselves into your bones, moments so sharp they never stop cutting. For me, it was the night I realized my mother loved the world's opinion more than she ever loved me. I grew up in a pristine Connecticut neighborhood, white fences, trimmed lawns, and mothers who measured worth by whispers. My mother, Evelyn Monroe, was the queen among them. Impeccable, untouchable, adored. She wore pearls like armor and kindness like a costume. The Monroe name carried weight, and she guarded it like a fragile crown. I was her daughter, Harper, the imperfect crack in her perfect reflection. While she polished her image at charity galas and church brunches, I lived in the shadows of her expectations. My childhood wasn't filled with love, it was filled with instructions. Sit straight, smile softly, never embarrass me. I learned that affection came only when I performed. But love built on performance eventually collapses. And mine did, spectacularly. I was 17 when the scandal happened. It wasn't even my fault. A rumor spread through school that I had been with an older college guy. Lies, twisted, exaggerated, but believable enough to burn through town gossip like wildfire. My mother's friends called her brave for handling such humiliation with grace. She smiled for them, lips trembling with concealed fury. That night, she didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask if I was scared. She only asked, "Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" I remember standing in our spotless kitchen under the harsh white light, her voice slicing through me. Every word was a verdict. Every tear I shed was an inconvenience to her brand of perfection. By morning, I was gone, shipped off to my aunt's house in Maine, for the summer. That was her story to the neighbors. Her real reason? Out of sight, out of shame. At my aunt's, I spent long nights replaying every memory with her, the way she'd fix my hair before school so I looked presentable, the way she'd force a smile through clenched teeth when I stuttered during piano recitals, the way she'd whisper, "You're ruining everything," whenever life didn't fit her script. And something inside me began to harden. It wasn't hate. Not yet. It was a seed, tiny, cold, and growing in silence. Over the years, I built a life away from her, college, work, friends who saw me for who I was, not who I embarrassed. But even in the quiet moments, her voice haunted me. I'd see her face on social media, glowing at charity events, posing with politicians, earning awards for her commitment to empowering women. Empowering women. The same woman who silenced her own daughter to protect her reputation. Each photo felt like a slap, a reminder that she'd erased me perfectly. To the world, Evelyn Monroe was flawless. To me, she was the architect of my silence. But one day, while scrolling through a local newspaper's feature on Women Who Inspire, I saw her name again, front page, smiling beside the mayor, praised for her authentic integrity. And that word, authentic, broke something final inside me. That was the moment the seed of pain became a plan. Because if she taught me anything, it's that images can be crafted and destroyed. And I was done being her collateral damage. It was time for the world to see the truth behind the perfection. As I closed my laptop that night, my reflection in the dark screen didn't look broken anymore. It looked ready. For the first time in my life, I felt power in my pain. I whispered to the silence, "You chose your reputation over me, Mom. So now, I'll choose the truth over you." And that's how the revenge began, not with fire or fury, but with quiet, calculated intent. Because when love dies in silence, revenge is born in it. The blueprint of a ruin. Revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with observation. The kind that makes you invisible while you study your enemy's every move, every weakness, every lie. For months, I watched my mother from the digital shadows. Evelyn Monroe had built herself into a brand, the embodiment of class and charity. She ran a foundation that helped young women rebuild their lives, which made me sick with irony. The same woman who couldn't stand the sight of her own daughter's imperfection was now saving other girls for applause. I followed her every post, every tagged photo, every interview. The pattern was clear. she lived for admiration. Her world was a stage, and validation was her oxygen. And so, I decided to take her breath away. The first step was to get closer, quietly. I returned to Connecticut under a new name, Harper Lane, journalist. I pitched myself as a freelance writer for the Hartford Daily, the same local paper that adored her. My story proposal? The rise of social charity icons, the women behind the image. They loved it. And just like that, I was assigned to write about the woman who taught me everything about appearances. When I reached out for an interview, my mother didn't recognize me, not right away. I'd changed over the years, hair darker, tone colder, posture stronger. She looked at me across that cafe table as if I were just another admirer seeking her story. "Of course, dear," she said, voice warm but practiced. "It's always a pleasure to inspire young women." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It never did. I forced a polite laugh, masking the hurricane beneath my ribs. Her perfume, gardenia and control, hit me like a memory I'd tried to bury. As she talked, I recorded every word. Her tales of sacrifice, truth, and dedication to women's growth flowed like rehearsed scripture. I kept nodding, playing the role of the fascinated journalist. But inside, every syllable was a match waiting to be struck. Because the more she spoke, the clearer her cracks became. She mentioned her foundations, anonymous donors, a web of people she claimed to know nothing about. But I knew Evelyn Monroe didn't breathe without knowing who held her strings. So I began digging. Late nights turned into early mornings as I traced those donations through tax filings and archived grant reports. The pattern was undeniable: inflated figures, missing amounts, and expenses that led straight to luxury retailers. She wasn't just maintaining a reputation. She was financing it with charity money. It was poetic. The woman who destroyed my image was about to be undone by her own reflection. Still, I didn't rush. Revenge isn't about speed, it's about precision. I gathered evidence, screenshots, records, leaked emails. Each piece was a quiet weapon in my growing arsenal. But even vengeance carries guilt, and mine came at night. In the silence, I'd wonder, was I any better than her? Was I becoming the monster she made me believe I was? Then I'd remember the 17-year-old me, standing in that cold kitchen, begging for love while she protected her reputation, and the guilt would dissolve like smoke. She had built her empire on silence girls like me. And I was done being silent. When the article was nearly ready, I crafted every line like poetry, not an attack, but an exposure. I wrote of the duality between public virtue and private hypocrisy. I let facts speak where emotion once screamed. The last line was a dagger wrapped in elegance. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of charity is when it becomes a mirror, reflecting not compassion, but the desperate hunger for perfection. I didn't name her directly. Not yet. But I made sure every breadcrumb pointed unmistakably to Evelyn Monroe. When I hit send on that submission, I didn't feel joy. Just a quiet hum of inevitability, the sound of a perfect mask beginning to crack. I watched as the editor replied almost instantly. "This is explosive. We're running it next Sunday." And for the first time, I smiled. Not the kind of smile she trained me to wear. But the kind that comes when justice starts to take shape. When the mask cracked. Sunday came like a storm disguised as sunlight. I woke before dawn, heart pounding, air electric. The Hartford Daily site refreshed again and again until I saw it, the headline I had written in quiet fury now shining in bold letters across the front page. "The price of perfection, when charity becomes a mirror." It was elegant. Subtle. Devastating. Her name wasn't printed, but everyone knew. Evelyn Monroe, the woman whose face had become the symbol of Connecticut grace, was now the whispered suspect behind every line. By noon, the phone calls began. Her friends, her donors, reporters. By evening, silence replaced admiration. And by nightfall, the perfect world she'd spent decades constructing began to collapse one crack at a time. I watched it unfold online, social media turning her halo into a noose. Is this about Evelyn Monroe? Funny how her foundation never showed full transparency. She's been hiding something. Always knew it. Each comment was a hammer striking the same wall that once locked me out. And yet, even as satisfaction pulsed through me, something inside trembled. Because behind every click, every rumor, was a memory. Of her brushing my hair before school. Of her perfume filling the hallway. Of her hand tightening around mine during church when I fidgeted. There was love once, twisted, conditional, but real in its own distorted shape. Still, I reminded myself, this was justice, not cruelty. She chose her image over me. I was merely letting her image speak for itself. But my mother wasn't a woman who surrendered easily. 3 days after the article went viral, she called a press conference. I watched the live stream from my apartment, my hands trembling around a mug of coffee I couldn't drink. There she was, perfect posture, flawless hair, a white blouse so crisp it looked like denial. Cameras flashed as she smiled through the panic. My foundation, she began, voice poised, has always been about empowering women to rise from injustice. Recent claims are not only misleading but hurtful. I have nothing to hide. It was almost impressive, the way she turned guilt into grace. But as she spoke, I saw something no one else did. The faintest twitch in her hand, the tremor at the edge of her smile. She was cracking. Still, her performance was convincing enough to buy sympathy. Some comments even started defending her again. She's too classy for corruption. Probably jealous people trying to ruin her. And that's when I realized, I hadn't destroyed her yet. I'd only bruised her armor. The next phase required precision, not through the media, but through her own reflection. So I requested another interview, a follow-up, to let her clarify her side. She agreed instantly. Of course she did. She couldn't resist another stage. We met in her mansion, the same house I'd grown up in but hadn't stepped inside in nearly 10 years. Everything was the same. The marble floors. The spotless white curtains. The smell of lavender and lies. She greeted me like a stranger again, not recognizing the daughter she'd banished. I recorded every word, every tremor in her voice, every contradiction in her story. But then something unexpected happened. As she spoke about painful falsehoods, her voice cracked, just slightly, and for a second, I saw her walls crumble. Her eyes glistened. She whispered, almost to herself, "Do you know what it's like to lose everything you've built?" For a moment, my heart stuttered. The journalist in me stayed silent, but the daughter, she almost answered. I almost said, "Yes, because you made me live it." But I didn't. I just let the silence hang, thick and heavy, until she collected herself, straightened her pearl necklace, and smiled again for the imaginary cameras. The interview ended with polite handshakes. But as I walked out, something inside me felt strange, like I'd just faced a ghost I wasn't sure I wanted to kill anymore. Still, there was no turning back. She had built her empire on deception, and I now had everything I needed to end it, her voice, her contradictions, her cracks. Outside, the sky broke open with rain, the kind that feels like confession. I looked up, letting it soak through my hair, through my guilt, through my grief. Tomorrow, the real story would begin. The one that would name names. The one that would finally burn her mask down to ashes. The fire beneath the mirror. The night before publication, I couldn't sleep. The final article, the one that named her, sat open on my laptop screen, every word glimmering with precision and poison. It wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Every sentence was crafted like glass, clear, sharp, and impossible to hold without bleeding. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, I hesitated. My finger hovered over send. And for the first time, I wondered, if I destroyed her reputation, what would be left of me? The thought felt foreign. Dangerous. But I shoved it down. Because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about truth. About the girl she buried under her lies finally clawing her way back to the surface. Still, when I closed my eyes, I saw her, not the woman from the galas and interviews, but the mother who once tucked a blanket around me after a nightmare, who whispered that Monroes never cry. And I realized, she'd taught me even my strength in the same breath she taught me to hide my pain. That contradiction haunted me. But justice demanded sacrifice, and mine was mercy. At 2:47 a.m., I hit send. The file left my inbox with a soft whoosh, but the silence afterward was deafening. By morning, the story exploded. Charity icon Evelyn Monroe under investigation for financial misconduct. The evidence I'd gathered, the donations, the recordings, the contradictions, all published in black and white. The world finally saw the cracks beneath her perfection. The foundation board suspended her. Sponsors vanished. Her photo disappeared from event banners overnight. And the whispers that once worshipped her name now cut like knives. I should have felt victory. Instead, I felt hollow. A part of me had expected a grand cinematic release, thunder, justice, maybe even tears of relief. But revenge is quieter than that. It doesn't roar. It just ends. Still, I wasn't done. I returned to her house one last time. Not as a journalist, not as a stranger, but as her daughter. When she opened the door, she looked smaller, like a statue stripped of polish. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red, her voice raw. She stared at me for a long time before whispering, "It was you, wasn't it?" The air between us trembled. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her lips quivered, half fury, half heartbreak. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" The same question she'd asked all those years ago. Only this time, I didn't shrink. "Yes," I said softly. I told the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. Evelyn Monroe would never give anyone that satisfaction, not even her daughter. "You ruined me," she whispered. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You ruined yourself when you chose strangers over me." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, not with hatred, but with everything unsaid. And then, she stepped back. Just enough to let me see the house behind her. The portraits, the trophies, the life she'd built. Everything she'd ever wanted to protect, now meaningless. I could have walked away. But something pulled me back. I reached into my bag and placed a single envelope on her entry table. Inside was a copy of the article, and an old photo of me at 17, before everything shattered. "I thought you might want to remember what reputation cost you," I said. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. I turned away before she could answer. As I stepped outside, the sun was rising, pale and cold. The air smelled like endings. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of glass breaking, maybe a picture frame, maybe a memory. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel broken. Just free. But freedom has a strange echo. It sounds like peace, until you realize it's also loneliness. The silence after the storm. In the weeks that followed, the world forgot my mother in the same way it forgets every fallen idol, swiftly, ruthlessly, without ceremony. News outlets replaced her story with fresher scandals. The whispers faded. The spotlight moved on. But she didn't. Evelyn Monroe vanished from society. Her foundation dissolved. Her friends, those polished ghosts of the country club, stopped returning her calls. The mansion stayed, but the laughter, the dinner parties, the clinking of champagne glasses, all gone. I told myself she deserved it. That justice was balance, not cruelty. Yet at night, when everything was quiet, her face lingered in the corners of my mind, not as the villain I exposed, but as the woman who raised me in her broken image. I'd moved into a small apartment in Boston by then. A clean slate. No family photos, no reminders, just my laptop, my writing, and the haunting question that refused to leave me. Was revenge worth it? One morning, as snow fell outside my window, I received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten, elegant, deliberate. Her handwriting. Harper. There's no version of this where I defend what I did. I chose pride over love, and in the process, I lost the only person who could have saved me from myself. You were right to expose me. The truth should have destroyed me, maybe it still will, but for the first time, I'm beginning to see who I really was beneath all that applause. I built a life for others to admire, not one for anyone to love. If you ever wonder whether I loved you, I did. But my love was flawed, shaped by fear. I didn't know how to protect you without protecting myself first. And I'm sorry that cost you your childhood. You taught me something, Harper. That truth, even when cruel, can be holy. Maybe this was your way of saving me after all. Mother. I must have read it 10 times before realizing I was crying. The tears weren't triumph or guilt. They were something else, something raw, human, undefinable. For years, I had built my identity around her absence, her rejection, her betrayal. Now, standing in my small kitchen with that letter trembling in my hands, I realized she had finally done what I never thought she could. She saw me. Not as her mistake. Not as her scandal. But as her daughter. That night, I sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and began to write again. Not another exposé. Not another confession. A story. About a woman who lost herself trying to be perfect, and a daughter who found herself by breaking that illusion. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was peace. A quiet, fragile kind that doesn't demand forgetting. Months later, I visited Connecticut again. The town had changed, new stores, new faces, the same old ghosts. I stopped outside her house, but I didn't knock. Through the window, I saw her sitting by the fire, older, smaller, holding something in her hands. A framed photo, the same one I had left behind. For a long time, I just stood there, watching her silhouette against the flickering light. There were no words left between us. Only understanding. She had built a kingdom of reputation, and I had burned it down, but from the ashes, something purer had risen. Truth. I turned away and walked toward the car. As the wind moved through the trees, I heard her voice in memory, softer now, almost kind. Monroes never cry. But this time, I did. Not because I was broken. But because I was finally whole. The world could have its reputations, its illusions, its applause. I had something rarer, the courage to face the truth, no matter how much it cost. And in that truth, I found the one thing my mother and I had both spent our lives chasing. Freedom.